back to that. All right.
We can sub out.
Sorry, I just want to make sure.
Read it.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Oh, I'll bail out anytime you want.
Right?
Yes, sir.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're the last presentation to go. Thank you for your patience. We're going to ask everyone to forget that we are your EMPL peers for the next 17-ish minutes. We are now LBJ consulting firm. My name is Patrick, and we have Cynthia, Rodney, and Justin, and the four of us are going to work to solve a complex problem with an organization applying LBJ techniques, and then we're going to end our presentation asking y'all for problems your organizations are having, and we are going to help as a collective group apply LBJ techniques to solve those problems. So I'm going to introduce Cynthia, who's going to paint us a nice picture of an organization and a problem.
Thank you, Patrick. So the organization that we're going to examine is Travis County Adult Probation, whose mission is to rehabilitate offenders to create safer communities. Unfortunately, Travis County's leadership has been unable to bring that about at the rate that we would like. So we increasingly see clients go back to prison, reoffend, fall back into old habits, and which prevents them from, living pro-social lives and ultimately creates more victims, which is what we're trying to avoid. So I'm going to rely on the LBJ consultants to offer some solutions to help us bring that about.
All right, by looking at people, process, and policy, we are going to kind of identify ways that LBJ would handle this situation. And so first we're going to closely examine people. The first thing we would do is we would go in, we get to know the employees. We would want to know their strengths and their weaknesses. The other thing we would do is we get to know our clients the same way that LBJ got to really know the American people. He could relate to the American people and he brought that into his work. We want to get to know who are the clients that are working with the probation office. We would find allies. We want to make sure that we know who are important within the organization and who's important outside the organization. That way we can build strong relationships with them. We also want to know who we can leverage, who in the community can we use to help push forth our policies and push forth our process. Not the most glamorous, but we want to know who we can intimidate a little bit, who we can kind of twist their arm to get to be what we need in order to have successful outcomes. We want to find mentors. We want to find people who can help us through this. We might not be experts in probation, but we can work with people who are experts and can help us become experts. LBJ self-admittedly was not an expert really on much, but he knew a lot about a little and would always ask for help. We want to apply that same logic. We also would be able to make sure we ask for help for wisdom. I think that's something that LBJ always asks for is, can I get some of your wisdom? And bring that into our consulting to help the probation office. I'm going to hand over to Ronnie, who's going to talk about, Justin, who's going to talk about the policy problems.
Thank you, Patrick. We wanted to address how would LBJ focus on policies in Cynthia's organization. So as this master of the Senate, as this great policy wonk, how could LBJ effectively pass policies? So we identified with Cynthia 2 policies that we feel like LBJ would most identify in order to have strategic success. So the first one would be shifting from a punishment policy to a rehabilitation policy. So that is really the core issue and what she finds in her organization. So they would focus on things like creating classes and workshops and community integration within their organization. And how they would effectively do that is by focusing on a workforce engagement policy. So that would be the second policy that LBJ would focus on. So that would be really identifying the parole officers and tying their success to the success of the parole leads. And he would kind of marry these 2 policies and focus on which one he was integrating first in order to have success with the other one, similarly how he did with passing the tax bill and the civil rights bill. So that's kind of how we think LBJ would most approach policies in Cynthia's organization. I'm going to have Rodney talk a little bit about LBJ and process.
Thank you. Process. We all know that change is hard and it takes time, right? One thing that is so important when you're looking at creating change is that you have the benefit of looking at history, right? And I think one of the things that LBJ had was being able to look at the 1957 Civil Rights Act, being able to see what some of those pitfalls were, knowing who the coalition was. So when that issue came up again, have that history to kind of base a new plan that could be more successful. So we look at that same thing in this situation of being able to look at the probation, department, looking at some of the initiatives that they have, tried to implement, and coming up with what are some of those pitfalls. What were some of the things that didn't work that you could make work in a plan that happens next. Another key point too that LBJ had is that oftentimes in change, it's important to be a part of the system, to change the system. So I think LBJ did a really good job of that in the fact that he was the Senate Majority Leader when the 1957 Civil Rights Bill went forward in the House. Also was a strong member in the Southern Democrats, so he knew and had the opportunity to learn more about some of the opposition there. So the same with the probation, being able to find out who some of your oppositions are and developing a plan to bring them to your side. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Cynthia.
So as we heard from the consultants, they're talking about the strategies of strategic perspective, understanding what the advantages and disadvantages and having historical references to make sure that we can bring about these policies, effective communication, and political savvy to bring people in who are going to help us change the organization. So now we're going to turn it over to you all to offer a problem that you would like the consultants to
So, and we'll just, I'll introduce Justin, who's going to kind of lead us into the questions. If any of you are familiar with Dr. Lutz's reading when they had the idea of throwing, the Republicans would have all these Nerf balls made, and they would throw them into the audience, and they would have people talk and ask questions, and they felt like they were engaging. We're going to apply that same technique to our Q&A at the end of our presentation. So Justin's going to lead us off. He has a nice ball for us to play with.
So we have a ball. In order to receive this ball, it is a small ball, and we'll see how good our hand-eye coordination is. But in order to receive this ball, you need to have a problem that you want LBJ, us, to help solve. So who has a problem in the organization?
Actually, before I hire,
You want it? All right.
That's the whole point. Come on.
Before I hire you potentially,
Please.
LBJ was the CEO of your consulting company. Would you still work there, and why?
I don't think so, and I'll tell you, I'll give you my answer why. The way they described how he treated his people in the book would be a huge turnoff for me.
Mhm.
That once you were identified as one of his people, he mistreated you, I probably wouldn't stay in an organization like that.
We would take a lot of the strengths learned from LBJ and bring them with us.
Startup.
Similar to the way I think it was Group 1 talked about how LBJ was successful in his time but wouldn't be successful currently. I think the same logic would apply. I think taking exactly his techniques to a consulting firm would be very difficult in today's age. But there are a lot, as we've been discussing for the last hour, of ways we could approach his techniques. I think having the will and the determination, I think, is most important, and that is what we bring to our clients.
So you guys, I'm sorry, I have a
You need
question.
the ball, yeah.
Well, I just have a question. I don't
You can
have a
use the
story.
That's helpful.
But when you mentioned using intimidation as a tactic, I mean, do you think that's ethical? And if so, why? I'm just curious. And I really don't know.
I don't know about ethical. Is it effective? Yes,
Yes.
probably, right?
Is it legal?
Ethical? Is it legal? Does it fit your policies, like, in your organization, or your values in your organization?
Right.
Those are questions that the answer probably no. Like I don't know. It depends on the organization.
Depends on the intimidation.
I could tell you that in
No, I
confidence
don't
here,
disagree.
judges do use
Mhm.
intimidation. So it does work
Mm-hmm.
to accomplish something.
And I'm talking intimidation in the sense that you're a larger company, maybe potentially acquiring another company, and there's other strategies within acquisitions and mergers, and so there is something to be said about intimidation.
It's just the intimidation of power structures.
But I'm not saying like one-to-one, like I'm gonna intimidate you.
Right, you're gonna beat me on that.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do that. Go ahead.
Well,
You want the ball?
sure, I'll participate.
So far, everybody's caught the ball.
I would say I'm the Geraldine Whittington of today in my organization, and I need to convince my boss to hire you all to help him implement some of the things that LBJ did. How can you help me with that, knowing who I am?
Ooh, that's an interesting question.
So how can we help you effectively convince or persuade somebody into hiring these consultants? Is that your question?
No, similar, because I'm not trying to, I'm just messing, I'm
Sure,
participating.
play along,
Yeah,
please.
yeah.
But, how can you help me, being the first African American in the White House, in the organization, to keep speaking on issues that I want to speak on and implement, but my boss is not listening to me like LBJ did?
I think I would try to find who your allies are, is what I would recommend, and find a way that they can help build awareness around your issues. Similarly, like our speaker was talking today, awareness and growing the will is like the first step, right? So I think that would probably be my first advice to you, is working on awareness and then speak about it enough that there's enough will to enact whatever it is you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and I think the other key too would be, you're in this unique situation, right? You're working day to day with this person, so utilize that personal relationship to make it personal for yourself, and talk about how that change could really have not just an impact on you, but an impact on the people, and kind of tie it to a bigger cause, like a bigger issue.
I think one of our greatest strengths as consultants is the ability to find common ground between people who it doesn't appear like they have any common ground. So I think, on the surface level, you might not agree with anything, but similar to how, Russell didn't want to pass civil rights legislation, he wanted, I forget the name of the airplane company, but he wanted the airplanes built in his state, and we knew there was common ground there, and so we could leverage that, to help find ways to incorporate civil rights into goals of other people. So I think finding some common ground on the surface level, it doesn't look like you have much in common, but deep down, you guys can work together, y'all can work together to solve a lot of good.
Dylan, you want to do that?
Brush it back with
So sorry. Well, Matt just said first. That was that Reagan and Bush comment.
Noted.
My organization's got a problem. We underspent, deobligated a significant amount of our budget on one of our programs, and now we're in the application phase for next year's budget, and there's threats of reallocating our budget because we did not spend it last year. How would you approach that problem, LBJ Consulting?
I just want to rephrase, you underspent last year, so you're afraid your budget may get reduced because of that for this year.
Yeah, that's part of the evaluation in the application for next year. And it's, we deobligated enough that we have to enter into a performance improvement plan with the monitoring agency. And the direct threat is that we could lose part or all of the budget for the program.
I'll take a first step from a people perspective. I would first examine who is the decision maker in this, and I would say, and I'm trying to get to know them and get to understand their rationale and why they make these decisions, and the history of them making these decisions, and how those decisions influence other people around them. So taking it from a person perspective, that would be my first step of analyzing the situation.
I would create a sense of urgency or crisis, like our speaker said today, and also maybe ride the wave of what the current climate is in the city, that homelessness is on the rise and it's become a present issue.
Yeah, I think I would go back to that historical perspective and look through the process to see if there was anyone else who had faced the same issue and was able to overcome it. And then maybe you'd have an opportunity to kind of emulate what they did, whether it was, going through another process to try to ensure that they kept their funding.
Is there anyone I can extort or?
Take them up to dinner.
I think that was I like the cleverness, frankly,
Yeah.
of turning the tables on
Yeah.
the group. So, well done. And Erica tried to turn the tables, I think, back on you guys, so, it's kind of like.
Good job, Ted.
So, I'd like to give you guys a little break. If you could use it very quickly so that we can, because I think Erica needs to leave about